We can get going. Looks like most projects are represented, at least on the WebEx. And to let folks know, we're looking to go back to a bit more of the format that we had done previously, where we have a science presentation, or at least a mini kind of update of a science presentation for the first kind of half of the call. It usually takes about 5 minutes for everybody to get in, get introduced to, or kind of log in, see the WebEx, and then hopefully 20, 25 minutes some questions on that science topic. And then what we had been doing is round robin with all of the projects, which include the 3 foundational science areas of the North Central Climate Science Center, as well as the management focus projects. And those were 3 projects from that started in 2013 and 5 that are started this year. That lead, 8 management focus projects and 3 foundational science areas. We deemed that was a little too rushed and hard to fit in an hour. What we've tried to do is go to then a spreadsheet, accounting, or kind of documenting of that. I'll get a little into that a little bit more after the presentation from today. And then allowing the 3 foundational science areas to give their updates. So not to shortchange the management focus projects, but for the sake of keeping it an hour, we're looking to have them on the call and then especially talk about those things that are across foundational science areas or intersect with the foundational science areas. So that's our new framework. I'll pause if anybody has any questions about moving to that. Okay, with that, I think we can move through to show or slides on the Open Science Conference. I'll give a brief introduction to kind of what we're hoping to accomplish by showing this off, and then Jill Lackett will describe some of the work that's being done post-conference, and Trevor Even here at the Climate Science Center to talk about some analysis of those questions that came out of the Friday, the last day of the Open Science Conference, with the thing that for funded investigators to pay attention to is that there will be a questionnaire that kind of tries to crosstalk the science issues that came out of the sessions we had Friday. We're trying to see which of those we actually are doing, or at least in some way those projects are addressing some of those science topics, which we then hope to sort of, with the survey, kind of relay some of the gaps in the science questions that people kind of communicated to us at the conference that maybe we're not covering with the funded project. So that's just a heads up to watch for. If you listen to what this is and kind of our report on the conference, because there will be that action for us to ask the funded investigators which scientific topics they're covering. Jill has prepared a survey to do that, and that we'd ask them to fill that out. It's a pretty short survey, kind of a 5 to 10 minute thing, I would imagine. So at any rate, I guess I'll hand it over to Jill to summarize what we're planning to do, kind of as a follow-up from the conference. But again, let me thank Jill as well as all the other staff that helped the conference. It went off smoother than I could have hoped, with all the moving parts that you get to see when you're kind of behind the scenes. So thanks again to Jill, and then thanks for Trevor, who's working on a BLM project as a graduate student here, kind of jumped in with both feet and took some notes and sort of compiled some of these things from the meeting. So both of those are appreciated. I'll hand it over for Jill to, and I'll just kind of run through the slides.
Yeah, sure.
So there we go.
Okay, so first, just a few statistics about our conference attendees. We had about 120 people there, not including the people just from CSU that snuck in. It must have been popular that way. So about 70 of those people came from Colorado, and about 50 came from other states, mainly states that are in our region. For the majority of those 50 people. Almost all of our university consortium institutions were represented. We are pleased about that. So CSU, Montana State, Iowa State, University of Montana, University of Colorado, University of Nebraska, and University of Wyoming were all represented. There was about 46 6 that I kind of lumped into resource managers, government agency scientists, and NGOs, and 27 students were registered attendees. And also, we are pleased to have a wide disciplinary background, widespread of disciplinary backgrounds represented, social scientists, natural and physical scientists. So it's refreshing at a conference to have cross-disciplinary interactions. So some of the things that we're working on now as far as conference outcomes is we're working on producing a 5-minute video from the conference, from the video footage that was taken at the conference, as well as some of the interviews that were done with conference attendees. We have a sort of the video kind of storyboarded out, and most of the video that was collected has been reviewed to pick out the best nuggets. So this summer, we're working on producing the video. We've also added an outcomes page to the conference website on Revamp website, and this page has the notes that we had. We had students take notes in all of the sessions, so the notes from the sessions are there. The links to the presentations that we had permissions to post are going up now. They're up now. And then some of the photos that were taken at the conference. So before I turn it over to Trevor, I just wanted to give a little background on the survey that I put together from the breakout group discussions. So what we recorded were the answers from the flip charts from the discussion about the most pressing science needs, the most pressing outstanding science needs. And what we want is for all the funded investigators to take a look at the survey, which is in a checklist format, and note on the survey whether or not their project addresses any of these science needs. And then we're going to use this to better document what we're doing and to identify any gaps. And then you'll receive it via SurveyMonkey. And could you click on that link? Don't try to write that down. You'll get an email. And then you can just X out of that. Yeah. So this is what it'll look like when it comes to you. So the first question, you will just identify yourself as which project you're working on.
Hopefully that's an easy one.
Yeah. And then the next 3 questions are all the same. It's just the answers from each of the different breakout groups, Rocky Mountain and streams and riparian areas and Great Plains. And then on the left is the science needs that were identified, and then it just simply has a bubble that you can check if your project is working on that. So Trevor's going to go into more detail about the data here, but just so everyone's familiar, this is what the survey is going to look like. They're going to get.
And I think this is a fairly informal. I think this is, we do have the spreadsheet where the USGS does require documents and reporting, and those annual reports are formal and have to be done. Data management plans have a pretty high bar, making sure those are accurate. This is more just sort of for our own kind of analysis, a little less formal, and I think that I would ask people to be more on the side of what's the word? Kind of answer yes more than no. If your project is like thinking of that,
inclusivity.
Be more inclusive or generous in what you think your project is doing, and that there's not going to be a follow-up years saying, you checked yes, and where's the result? More just sort of us trying to understand what topics we're doing.
Do you want to be more specific on this? This is Joe. I just showed up from another meeting. Like, not just to have does it address it, but, you know, does it directly address it, or are you thinking of addressing it? Just a couple of columns there, like, 'cause I think people are going to be reticent to just say yes because they'll feel like they're promising something.
Right, I understand that, and I would just ask, you know, people on the phone to know, and most people I think that are going to get this are on the call, or we can interact with them.
I guess that's true.
But you know, we're not going to hold people to this, but I don't know if we can add multiple responses, even in a text field. If people, we want to make it as easy as possible and less onerous.
I guess then just putting a text box at the end saying, you know, any more comments or whatever probably is an easier thing to do. No.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, you know,
because there's always, you know, often those text boxes are something I just sort of say, oh yeah, this is where I really want to put my energies, or this is that kind of thing.
And maybe we could think of different columns, like primary focus of the study, or, you know, indirectly related to, it's a good suggestion to be a little bit more nuanced in that reply.
Just a little bit more, just to allow people to say, because you want people to say yes, meaning that they're thinking of it or it fits in, even if they don't already have a deliverable promised on that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's making to answer yes to something that's not like, does your project address this science need, which sounds like, which to me means, oh, am I making a product, or, you know, does it directly, I mean, maybe I'm putting too fine a point on it. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'll modify this slightly before I send it out. Just another survey for those of you who did attend the conference you'll be getting is a evaluation of the conference itself, which will also be coming from SurveyMonkey. So stay tuned.
So again, you watch for an email that has that. No need to record. And then I guess we'll hand it over to Trevor.
Yeah, sure.
The results.
So these the next few slides that you'll see are some sort of cosmetically improved versions of the science need questions. Some of them came out, you know, pretty bluntly. And these were voted on by each of the breakout session groups, and the bars you see are equivalent to how many people chose that particular science need as one of their 3 most pressing issues. So it's just kind of a rough sort of comparative feeling of how the rooms were thinking about each of these different things. And if you just go down the list, you know, you can see these are the top 10 from each group. There were some more that were thrown on, but I think these kind of capture what people were thinking about, and you'll notice some overlap between each group. You know, issues of multiple interacting stressors. How do we think about those kind of complex systems? There were a lot of, across both the management-oriented questions as well as the science needs questions, there were a lot of you know, comments on needing to scale things down temporally and spatially into relevant you know, frameworks for people. Can we do that? Is that even possible? And if so, what are the caveats, things like that? A lot of questions about what are future achievable conditions also, as you'll see as we go through, and sort of the pathways for adaptation, as well as what sort of desirable futures do people want, actually came up in more than a few different things. And so you can look through, and you'll see all these on the survey, but just wanted to give you go maybe to the next one.
So by the number counts, you're just indicating the number of people who responded in some way, right?
Yes. At the end of the breakout sessions, each person was given 3 dots, and then we were told to go up to the front of the room and place those dots next to the science question we thought was most relevant. And since everybody had 3, this is sort of the number of votes is equal to 3 times the number of people who are in the room. So this is kind of, as everybody came up with these different ideas during the breakout sessions, we then listed them all on a big sheet at the front of the room, and then chose, I guess, sort of which ones we felt were the most pressing needs. However, I wouldn't take that as some sort of like the one at the top is the most important, because as you'll see as you go through, some of these have some overlap, and some of them have some issues that might tie into some of the other questions that people are asking. So
yeah, it's hard for you to actually think about a dot response to, like, what are ecological responses to climate stressors, or how do we do a climate model?
Yeah.
It's more of an open-ended question.
Right.
So
I think you see a little bit that people, I think, gravitated more to a little more specific questions. So while it's a very good question, what are ecological responses to climate stressors, that's our whole foundation, one of the three foundational teams.
yeah.
It's a big question, but you'll see, there's more dots or votes for these maybe a little more nuanced questions.
Yeah, very, very specific things. I think especially issues of scale and complex systems come up on all of these, and I think those are issues that naturally everybody's got a lot of questions about. Those are the hardest questions, it seems like. So I feel like, kind of expected that we'll see those at the top. But there's some really interesting ones throughout these, and people came up with some very interesting questions. So I encourage you to take a look, and if nothing else, maybe get inspired by it. So would you mind the next one? This one was Great Plains Terrestrial. This one had some different issues and it kind of highlights how different some of these ecosystems are, because there are a lot of questions about agriculture, and a lot of the scaling issues come into a little more focus when you're thinking about agriculture, where you have these, sort of 1 to 2 year decision-making processes, and there was a lot of, talk about that, talk about figuring out ways to bring those populations together. We're also part of those discussions as I was looking through. Maybe next one, and then streams and riparian areas. Of course, you had a lot of questions about hydrology, aquifer recharge, water balance, water use. Some very good kind of like focused questions came out of this one, I think. But then again, on the social science side, you see a lot of questions about what are the incentives for people, what are the like real determinants of people's ability to engage with climate change adaptation stuff on the ground. And one thing that came out of this is there were questions not just about like how do we better serve managers, but then how do we get science to communities? How do we get science to different levels of administration and local systems? How do we take it from the top level decision makers down to maybe household decision makers? So yeah, next one. This was just some kind of summary of the management needs discussion, as well on the next slide some of the collaboration comments that people had. And these are just some kind of main themes that came out of the individual surveys that I read through, as well as the broadsheets. Again, communicating engagement across diverse populations. People spoke about the need to figure out ways to communicate to politicians who may be taking a stance, and how we go about that in an effective way, and smart way, dealing with, again, decision makers at all different levels. And then there was also some comments about how you engage young managers, actually, not just young scholars, but young managers, people coming up inside of these institutions, and what we can do to provide for them. There was also a lot of talk, of course, about uncertainty, and what we are talking about when we're talking about uncertainty, and how we can start using uncertainty as something other than, I guess, a sort of gap, and how do we conceptualize it and communicate about it sort of affirmatively. There was also a lot of comments about understanding people's sort of real adaptation options, and then, of course, water was everywhere. Everybody's worried about water, and naturally so. And then, yeah, scaling things down. And then just this last one had some interesting stuff about, yeah, thank you, yeah. Collaboration and the NCCSC's role, and maybe climate science centers in general. But, across all three working groups, and across, like, people, managers, scientists, and students, all were very focused on figuring out ways to encourage co-production of knowledge or collaborative research design, however you want to, talk about that. But it was really about getting buy-in at the very beginning of research processes from your stakeholders, and figuring out ways to do that effectively, as well as providing, support for those kind of models, because it can be tricky and it does need some wiggle room, apparently. And on that note, there was a lot of talk about how we need face-to-face kind of stuff like the conference time and better tools for working collaboratively, remotely, and things like that. There were quite a few survey answers that people just drew dollar signs, which I thought was nice. But there was, there was some nuance to that, and that people talked about better tools for like flexible funding structures when you need to bring somebody on a project or somebody needs to leave a project when you're doing interdisciplinary research. That was talked about in a couple of the groups. There was a lot of generally positive comments as well when people talked about what the NCCSC can do is keep doing what you're doing for the one. And then, yeah, there was also some mention across the groups about a need to sort of bring younger scientists and scholars and, again, managers into the picture a little more. One person had a really good comment where it was like, stop siloing before it starts, and figuring out ways that graduate students can do some interdisciplinary work. It is very hard for graduate students to do that.
Only you can prevent siloing.
Yeah, hopefully. So, yeah, that's about it. I mean, there's quite a bit more, and if somebody's interested, just let me know.
Thanks again, Trevor. I think he kind of stepped up and took that bull by the horn, so to speak, to synthesize what we heard from that. And I think this is, between it's a little more than just posting the presentations, but a little follow-up. And obviously, if you had a different group of people on that Friday morning, you would probably have a slightly different list of questions. But, I think they give an interesting list to start from. And I think what will be, kind of what we then, through the survey that Jill mentioned, we could have kind of numbers of projects that are addressing that, and again, like with this general one, I would imagine that every, we're going to have every project is like thinking of that, so that would be okay. And then I think the thing would be to, like, if we see any of these kind of top three or even any of these that don't have any projects even thinking about that, whether they're doing it as a specific focus of their project or at least would need to do that indirectly. If nobody's doing anything on that, that might be a highlight for us to think about what we could do.
So I wonder if if we could incorporate a write-up on this on your report in our next newsletter, just saying here's an outcome, short summary of what you got.
I can't make any promises.
I can help you with
we can certainly think about it, whether Trevor has the time and inclination to keep doing that, or we just kind of figure out a way to do it. I think it would be good, and maybe having these graphics augmented with the surveys would be a pretty interesting.
Yeah, and some of the text from the other answers.
Good. Any questions on the review of the Open Science Conference? All right, let's change gears slightly here, and this is an introduction to folks who are not one of the main funded PIs that I sent the note to. We opened up this spreadsheet, and this was, again, a little bit more work maybe for PIs, but maybe a little bit less because you're not in the spot to report on our monthly check-ins. We'll send out a note with this link as a reminder the week before. What we are promising at the Climate Science Center is to complete the gray columns of this spreadsheet, which describes the status of the data management plan. And thanks to Leanne Wilson, who's on the call, who's our data management plan manager, or data manager for the North Central. Kind of in short notice, I think we finally got the spreadsheet together Wednesday, and she was leaving on leave Thursday and Friday, so I appreciate her getting in and populating those first two columns, and then Melissa Maddie, who handles the accounting for the North Central, as well as a couple other CSCs, filled out that third column, the spending to date. So the gray columns, the first three, the Climate Science Center is on the hook to provide that information to people, try to have that updated the week before, at least the Friday before these monthly check-ins. And this is not necessarily information we all need to go about and share on these monthly calls, but it is information we sort of think that's good to report out once a month to the PIs. The issue is that USGS does have the mandate of some reporting. As we move into a possibly different administration, we've been audited once. The LCC, Landscape Conservation Cooperatives, have been audited multiple times. I know that reporting and annual reports are, kind of a pain. They seem to crop up. A year flies by sooner than you think. But we do have a template for those annual reports, specific topics that need to be in there. They're on the order of a 5-page type summary. And we do, it is a requirement of the funding. And I think it is important for our continued collective endeavor that those are completed. So Leanna is populating this spreadsheet and will every month with kind of a heads up of what reports would be due, as well as the status of the data management plan. And then regarding funding, the USGS will not provide additional funds beyond what's currently allocated to a project, so say year 2 funds for a 3-year project, until 75% or more of those funds are spent down. And I know that it is particularly a challenge in the first year. What typically happens if you haven't spent down up to 75%, we do a no-cost extension on the current period of performance and then augment those funds, or add the second-year funds once you're at the 75% level. So because of that rule, which I recognize is onerous, and we've pushed back a little bit, we said the first year, 75% is unreasonable, kind of, you got to do some hiring. The best we've been able to get back is it's not that hard to get a no-cost extension. And then, once your money's down. Where it's been a little bit sticky is if there's, say, 3 different universities, and there's, one project. So one university might have spent 100%, but they're a small part of that project. They're looking to keep going. They've got somebody to pay, but they can't get more money for that project because another part of the project maybe hasn't spent hardly any. So, it's good to kind of make sure your subcontracts or collaborators understand where you are with this and that they're not going to be able to get those funds until the 25% is down. So one investigator usually works fine. If they haven't spent any, they don't need any more. If there's a subcontract, it went out, they didn't get, they're needing more, they won't get more until the full project comes through. So that's a little bit of just kind of, that's the only place that it's been, I think, a bit challenging.
So I guess related to, given this particular example has its anniversary date on July 9th, I'm reading that correctly,
yeah.
Then those PIs, Joe and Imtiaz, or Imtiaz and Joe, need to look at their budgets, and if they need to do a no-cost extension, which I think on this particular one you do, get it in now, get it in soon.
And the no-cost extension is a rough outline of how those funds, a description of why they haven't been spent and how it will be spent kind of by the projected end of that no-cost extension. So, it took us a while to hire a postdoc. We brought him on in June. We'll be charging monthly at this amount. We'll be done, kind of just an outline. It doesn't have to be a detailed, completely redone spreadsheet, but kind of a point-by-point how that budget is going to then kind of, you will make that target. And that's actually part of the reporting. So you can kind of maybe cut and paste from one or the other. The annual reports talk about funding and any hold-up in funding and where you're going with that.
Jeff, a quick question. This is Imtiaz. On this example again, so we hope to use more than 75% by the end of the current end date. That's a projection, and I think we are on the way. But do we still need to apply for a no-cost extension if you don't end up thinking we'll use 100% of it?
It's on an annual basis, Imtiaz. So it's not by the end of the funded period, but every year you need to expend on your burn rate at least 75% before you get the next year's fund. So year by year, you're going to have to update that. And so right now,
my understanding was if we have anything left over, we have to do a no-cost extension.
No. At the very end of the project.
Okay. Great. Okay. So
that makes clear.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 issues. There's if you can't charge against a project if it's done. So at the very end of a project, you need a no-cost extension to keep billing against it, keep the books open, and that's pretty. For up to 1 year, it's pro forma, apparently, pretty much. For more than a year, it takes a little extra, but it can be done. But the kind of the newer issue is this: you don't get additional monies for, say, year 2 or 3 or the final year until you've spent down 75%. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thanks.
And so we're hoping that these monthly updates that Melissa will provide would kind of give people that heads up, so that it's not like, holy moly, I thought I was charging it, and sometimes it's through the accounting just hasn't billed CSU. Maybe CSU thinks they spent the money and they burned it, but they haven't charged against CSU. They're waiting for a every quarterly bill. Different accounting departments do it differently. So, and then we're asking the PIs, including the foundational science areas, to fill out these 3 columns. So we've gotten a little bit of, I think we've done okay internally at the North Central to let the national office know of meetings and projects that we're working on. But they've kind of asked us to expand and make sure we include any of the funded investigators of what projects are going on. They just kind of want to keep a heads up of that. So that's where, and for our own kind of coordination across all the family, so to speak, is to let people know what meetings and events are coming up, and then any products that will be coming out in a month, and then what you need in particular from the foundational science areas. And I think that very last column is an opportunity for the conversation of these monthly check-ins for that next half hour. We can do a round robin from the 3 foundational science areas, but then kind of click through the spreadsheet and we can see anything that's being asked of the foundational science areas.
So I can't remember, I think in our staff meeting we talked about having like a host center or CSC center column.
I have this. I just started that today. We had a call actually with Southern Great Plains and Collins, organized that call with the Rapid Ecosystem Assessment for BLM and the Southern Great Plains. And so I think this, I don't know, it's a little bit apples and oranges, and maybe we won't do this by month, but we do want to make sure we get kind of just the ad hoc or the calls that come into us. They're not part of the funded projects, but we will be trying to track those.
So we could put things in like we talked about the rising voices that we're supporting.
Yeah.
The meeting that we had yesterday with the regional.
Well, yeah, I think we might find a different way to track that than outside of this spreadsheet. Okay. Although, I think that what we're trying to do with this spreadsheet primarily is communicate a little bit with the PIs, but then have a venue for understanding what the 3 foundational science areas are doing, and then what the exchange with other things. So, in terms of like meetings and all that activity, it is relevant to the foundational science areas, so we think about how that could be brought in. And maybe take that offline and think about how we do our meetings and projects, and maybe it could be added here.
Yeah.
And then, the hope would be, folks, that if you do this, you kind of pick on someone else instead of just Joe, but good job, Nina, at all, 52%, pretty close. But, then, you'll have a year's worth of this spreadsheet that, when you go to do your annual report, what meetings did you go to? It'll be a cut and paste, and what products did you deliver, cut and paste, and you might summarize the exchange with the Climate Science Center and the Foundational Science Area. So, by doing this monthly, we hope that that's kind of, it's not going to be redundant, but actually help feed into whatever the reporting has to be done. Let me pause if there's any questions about kind of this approach to doing some of the management, and Leanne has something here.
Yeah, I have something to add. So I believe it was Nina, and then after you added your things for the publications, I added a little thing for a 1-sentence summary of what it's about. That's something that USGS wants. So if you don't mind, if the 2 of you could get them to me by the end of the day tomorrow, just like a really short 1-sentence summary of it.
Okay.
And then anyone else in the future who has things coming up, just make sure to add a little 1-sentence thing about what it is.
Okay. And we should send them to you separately, or is there somewhere on the spreadsheet you want us to put them?
You can either just add them right into that box, or feel free to email them to me separately, but either way is fine.
Okay.
And then one other thing as well from our call with USGS a while ago is that they've got some specific language that they want added into, I'm guessing, reports as well as publications, essentially just recognizing the CSC as a source of funding. We have that language, and we're trying to get it up on the website on the funded projects page. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm hoping it'll be up this week.
What we could do, too, is like on this product, we could add a comment and just add it right there.
Okay.
pasted in, I think everybody would be able to see that.
Okay, it's a full page of stuff 'cause it's different for like, of course.
I thought it was a sentence.
I know.
Disregard.
So it's a sentence for anyone who's university affiliated, but like for people like Susan, for example, who's a USGS person, has an entirely different thing that she needs to say than everyone else. So, but we'll get it up there, and I can send it around once it's up. So.
Good. Well, we could maybe link somehow to this spreadsheet.
Sure.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. Any other comments? Okay, why don't we then go do a round robin, start with climate, and then we'll go to impacts. I believe Arjuna's on the call. Andy did say he's out. He's out on travel, and then we'll go to impact adaptation. But so start with you, MTS and Joe. Anything from the foundational area?
Right. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is MTS Rangwala. I'm sitting in with Joe Barsugli here at NOAA, Boulder. So some quick updates. I'll fill in a few, and then Joe will add on to it. The first thing about we are holding this regional climate modeling workshop. This is a small invitation-only workshop, about a little under 30 people. And so some updates there that we have a date and a place finalized. So this workshop is really exploring next steps, and the state of art related to RCMs, and again with respect to convective processes and other issues that relates to the application to ecological modeling across the Great Plains. So it's really a focused one over Great Plains. Can we really provide more value from these climate models?
And may I suggest, this is Joe, that the survey results will be very nice for actually keeping people in line about what the purpose of all this work is. So we'll probably use some of those gaps questions as a motivator. Now that we were going to do those topics anyway, but having that gives it a lot more substance. So when we have the modelers, we say, well, this is what people really care about. So thank you for those survey results. Yes.
And and we really kind of among the participants, we really want modelers, but also the expert users of data sets for ecological applications, as well as experts that are familiar with climate risks in the region. So, really kind of challenging the modelers about what the value we're getting from these experiments. More regarding logistics, we have the budget in place. I just talked to the CU budget person recently. So we hope to put together an invitees list by early next week and send out these invitations.
And we've already surveyed a core group of people who were available for that date. So we picked the date based on having at least a core set of participants who can make it.
So if anybody has strong inclination to be part of it, or have any specific suggestions of people, please let us know. We're still kind of putting together this list. So moving on, just want to update on the evapotranspiration research that what we have been planning as Candida Davis, our new postdoc who joins in July, and what she will kind of get engaged with right away. And other people like Mike Hobbins from NIDIS will be involved in that. At the plenary, Joe talked about Mike's research on finding drivers of ET variability across continental United States, really using the observed data. We really want to, as Candida joins, explore the climate models, kind of validate a select set of GCMs, see what do GCMs have to say as compared to some of these observed relationships we are getting, and then kind of explore projections of ET across these models, get some kind of a variability, just explore what is the variability space there amongst these models, the uncertainty space in ET projections. So that's kind of a starting point but we kind of make some dent in during summer, but I think we take it from there. So we start with few selected GCMs, but then kind of explore, then maybe kind of expand it to more and more GCMs. So that's a couple things from me. If there are any questions, you can ask can answer that. Joe has a few more things to add.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up on some things that came out of the conference and also out of the regional climate services retreat that we had out on the high plains. And just some very brief things. Topics that came up at the retreat and that were discussed as joint activities, but ones in which we are involved through either bridging with Western Water or being part of the climate team. One was anticipating some of the upcoming ENSO effects in the region. Andrea Ray was doing this, but was involved in that. And as you know, Jeff, we had that email. That's not, it's not going to happen in June. We're still trying to work what we're going to be doing with that. But we do intend to contribute to that, and I think the understanding is that you will be helping us with the logistics, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so we've been gathering information, and I've been just outlining what the science is myself. The basic impacts coming up, and basic narrative of what the high points are, what we should be concerned about in the region, and working a little bit with Klaus Wolter, who's also very busy, but he needs to be part of this. So that we will continue to work on that, but I want to make everyone aware of that. And if you have any questions or feedbacks or things what would distinguish a sort of a more in-depth look at the El Nino aspects and the prospects, more in the scenario, more in like the if this takes place, and if it's a large, keep monitoring this. But if it does develop as a strong El Nino this fall, this is what you should be on the lookout for. Not in the sense of a prediction, if you understand what I'm saying. I want to make this more about awareness of the types of impacts, so people could start to at least put that in their planning, if they're flexible, to put in some sort of planning, or at least, again, planning or monitoring ideas. And the big impacts usually are the warmth in the northern tier in the winter. That's the really, and the impacts on snowpacks. We want to figure out how to communicate that. The second one.
Wait, Joe, if I could just give some background for people on the phone who might not be aware, is the system setting up to be a strong El Nino year. We kind of thought, well, we're more of a climate center. It's a 30-year kind of average and normals. However, it's going to look pretty silly if all indicators are, kind of pointing to a pretty extreme El Nino year, and we don't communicate that somehow to our stakeholders. And then, we're not saying predicting for sure, but, what does it mean? And it's probably going to be a little cooler and wetter, and exactly as Joe was relaying, kind of how maybe have an informed webinar that describes that for these management projects, all the partners on that project, and the stakeholder committee, just to kind of give them an update as to, kind of what the system's setting up to do and be, and then probably see the results of that El Nino are probably going to be more prominent in the fall, and so we're trying to kind of beat that a little bit.
And also, I guess we're trying to hit a sweet spot where we're not too technical, but where we actually do relate it to quantities that people are more concerned about, things like cold air outbreaks, right? I mean, once that actually there is a signal of that, of fewer of them in ENSO years. But I want to really get the science behind that before I talk about it, or before Andrea talks about it. I'm not sure what other indicators we could look at that aren't temperature and precip, but if you have any, and the idea is to make this a little bit iterative, to start with some of the basics. Again, the narrative is not all that complicated of the bigger impacts. It's conveying that this is a scenario that's likely to happen, but not for sure. That's going to be the graphics I've seen that we can draw from are a little bit too technical, so we're going to have to sort of simplify them for an audience that's not been part of repeated briefings. Second one is that came up there, which was not on our list of priorities, but it was also this thing that, Jeff, you had this idea of a Missouri Basin water balance. So Gabriel, Sine, and myself, and a couple others have been emailing to just come up with the very basics, that we don't have this graphic or, the kind of thing you have for the Colorado River, where I know the numbers, well, as to how much rain falls, how much is roughly in the river, roughly how much goes to ag, all that kind of stuff. We do have the numbers. We're progressing on that, and probably, I don't know what time frame but I think we're going to have something out really soon because we have a lot of the numbers from the water census from USGS at the appropriate scale. So we'll probably be asking for feedback on that. Finally, work with, so Helen Sofair, at the conference we were talking about writing up a paper from her experience with some of the methodology issues in incorporating climate scenarios into ecological work. And she's written up an outline, and we've agreed to, I've certainly agreed to help with that more intensively to try to bring that to state where it's used. So that's three quick updates on follow-on from the conference. Lots of other little collaborative things that potentially came up from the conference, but we'll work on those as they mature.
Good, thanks, Joe, and MTS. And I think maybe I will. Stacy started this with kind of PIs of record. I might modify the spreadsheets to do just FSA climate, FSA impact, FSA adaptation, and have the PI names on this one, just a heads up to maybe.
You should do that, and then have the PI, you can have them listed underneath or something if you need to.
Okay. All right. There was talk, Joe, about the white paper on, you and MTS working on a white paper on scenarios that was coming out this summer. Any update on that? Maybe we could take it offline because I think I was having an interesting conversation with Linda Joyce at the Climate Hub about how the more broader picture of scenarios, like the National Park Service idea of what scenarios are, and to think about that in terms of an ecosystem services issue that climate ecosystem services, which I understand is going to be a Council on Environmental Quality push. So how do you describe ecosystem services, and maybe scenarios is one way to do it. But I can take that offline, but I'm just kind of curious where that white paper was.
Okay, so let me answer that. Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't want to go over my 10 minutes, including that. But we have in touch with people like Linda Joyce and John Rice and others who are working on the Southern Rockies LCC and the LCD project. So the conversation is going, and it's going somewhere, it looks like. We had one call 2 weeks ago. The initial intention was actually write not a white paper, but something for publication and for the work done, the climate scenarios work done for the Southwest Colorado project, but then that really fed into a lot of other projects that are going out there. So we've been in conversation with folks from the Great Plains, the Northern Great Plains, like Brian Miller and Erica Rowland and others. So they've been part of this conversation, including the Southern Rockies LCC folks. So I see a potential for that paper to come out during summer. So regarding the publication, that's still on the cards.
Okay, let's take it offline, because I know from that retreat we talked about a magazine or publication between the Western Water Assessment, the USDA Hub, and the Climate Science Center. And I wonder if this white paper could be kind of something of a catalyst for that topic. So maybe we can take that
Sure. Sorry, I was not at the retreat, so I was not aware of this one.
Right, yeah. Anyway, great. So maybe going to impacts, I believe our June is still on.
Hi, everybody. Good morning again. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for the impact, as impact team, we are still analyzing the cover change within North Central Climate Science Center domain. So right now I'm in the writing phase. I'm preparing the report and the manuscript. Recently I have finished the fragmentation modeling for 9 greater wildland ecosystem within NCCSA domain. what I found was that the Lake Traverse, which is a tribal land, and the territory of this tribal land is the most fragmented one. So here is within this week, I mean within the June, I'll have over 40-page report on the cobble change and fragmentation analysis, and hopefully it will be based on the manuscript format. And secondly, what we are doing right now is collecting the information, working on some data sets to run the species distribution model within LCCSC. That is our third question of the proposal. So right now I'm collecting the data from the tops, that is snowpack, runoff, soil moisture, GPP and NPP data. That is right now we have. Any question?
I believe MTS, there was Andy was calling for a kind of the impacts team meeting sometime in Bozeman in the fall, and maybe I think Brian was attending.
Yep, I'll just pull up the date here. It looks like I think tentatively November 5th, 6th, but I think that was still being finalized.
And I would like to ask one question. When is did you set up the time for the SAM modeling training?
Yes. Let me add that because it's kind of the impact team kind of run not out of Andy and our juniors work, but what we're doing here at the Climate Science Center. I don't know, Colin, if you know it offhand, I can pull it up.
No, offhand I don't.
I'll get it here shortly. I think is it. Anyway, I'll fill that in, and maybe we'll go to the adaptation team to give your update. I think Shannon's online, but we'll start with that.
One of the big things is Shannon, Tyler, a couple other folks have submitted a publication on the Tampa River work. So that's really good work there. Continued discussions with Brian Miller and the project that he's doing with Amy Simstad in South Dakota, looking at sort of the ways of incorporating some of the scenario discussions with some of the, in some of the drought response areas. That's moving forward pretty well. Rudy and Nina, sort of in conjunction with the Climate Science Center, is in a process of, they have hired a new postdoc to work with us, so that's moving forward. And I think, if I remember correctly, Rudy, she'll be looking at sort of institutional characteristics related to adaptation efforts within the region. Is that sort of a good shorthand for what she might be doing?
Yeah, can you guys hear me, or am I on mute?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, she's going to be working with identifying decision support tools associated around water and drought issues in the area. So she has, we actually just got word today she sent in her paperwork, so it's in the process. We're all very excited about that. I mean, I'll send an email out to everybody on our team about that. So, yeah, very excited. Her name's Amanda Craven, and she's coming in from Stanford.
And starting in the fall, I guess?
Correct, yes. Yep, she's going to be starting this coming fall. She has to finish up some projects and some work out there before heading over here.
And so in a broader set of issues, trying to work within our group here at the Climate Science Center, including Jill Lackett and Jeff and Brian and Shannon, to think about how do we actually look at broader issues of social vulnerability and social ecological adaptation efforts. I think the drought focus has really brought in a lot of useful concepts to play, and we're going to continue along those lines, but I think there's probably other aspects of social ecological vulnerabilities within our domain that we need to also look at. So that's something that Jill and I have been talking about, how to do that. Also, with discussions with Jeff, looking at sort of some of the institutional connections and relationships dealing with issues of adaptation and their responses. And so we're actually thinking about doing that, following up with Jeff on the idea of this survey interview type thing with our SAC. And so we'll talk about that tomorrow afternoon, about how we might do that.
Good. And there's a little bit of background. It's like we do have this new joint stakeholder committee with the USDA Hub, and kind of maybe that potential hasn't been realized as much as possibly could, and take advantage of that adaptation foundational and the human dimensions, or the kind of interdisciplinary team with that to sort of interact with that joint stakeholder group.
Yep. So anything from Shannon? Shannon? Oh, yeah. Looks like Shannon.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess the only other things I would add is Dennis mentioned we just submitted the manuscript on the dry work that was focusing on the first two case studies, the Northwest Colorado and Southwest South Dakota. And a couple weeks ago when we had our Wind River Drought Project kickoff meeting for the technical assessment, while I was there, I also did more interviews and field work that are part of the broader dry project. And so we'll be in the process of processing those transcripts and analyzing the Wind River case over the upcoming months. And then additionally, the Colorado State BLM Social Vulnerability Assessment is still in the works. We are working on the review paper for that project, and Corey at Western State is still waiting for the funding from BLM. So once that funding's set in place, I think we'll start to think about how to start engaging the broader community, the adaptation community, to bring additional input from other folks who have expressed interest in being part of that project. So that's it for now. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Shannon. And I think just what I will do in future months is compile all of what we have in this last column of what projects need or are expecting from the foundational science area. I believe the only project that had any comment, and I think Ben's on the line, interested in I think that would be for the impacts team, that they got some work going on with the habitat modeling of big sagebrush. I'll compile those, have them on a separate sheet. We could maybe even start the report outs from the 3 foundational science areas, and maybe I would code this, I would have next to it, it's the impacts team, and then we can sort by impacts, climate, or adaptation. I don't know, is there anything you want to add to that, Ben? Or, I appreciate you filling this out. I know that kind of early adopters are need recognition and appreciation.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I think you're referring to this comment I made about us looking for presence and absence and cover data for big sagebrush.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so for our project, so Katie Renwick joined the group a couple of weeks ago to work on the big sagebrush project, and I think she's online right now. And
yep,
so we've been assembling. We've been assembling a data set on presence, absence, and cover of big sagebrush and 3 subspecies, and working mostly with data from the ReGap and VegBank archives, and we're looking for more data beyond those those databases, but also for observations for Montana. So if people in the consortium have suggestions of where we could look for data from Montana, this would be helpful. We had some follow-up discussions with people that were at the Open Science meeting, but we're still searching for things.
Good. And I know Geneva's on the call. She might have some insight, and I know that Cam Aldridge is on your team, so he would have been the person I'd ask. So, that tree.
That's what I was going to say, because I know they were trying to get Montana to support building the same type of map that they developed for Wyoming. And I don't know the status of that, so I would definitely talk to him.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, he had mentioned that he thought there were some kind of confidentiality issues because I think those data were collected for the sage grouse. But yeah, we should follow up with him on this.
And Kate Kitchell might know, and Geneva joins, I think, is it a monthly call that USGS organizes on sagebrush, and so sage grouse, that we could bring that request to them?
Yeah, and Cam is on that as well.
Okay.
It is true that there's all kinds of stumbling blocks about getting information out, but, you know, it is federally funded, so there should be access for research use, even if it has not been published or reviewed. But again, we can talk offline, but Cam is the front line of this.
Okay.
Good. And that's, you know, I think we might kind of evolve or migrate into sort of these project requests for the foundational science areas would be good. And I think that Joe and MTS stay in touch from Colin, Marion, or myself talking about this Southern Great Plains REA. They're interested in using WorldClim data, and we want to make sure that that's sort of appropriate or nothing too ridiculous about that, at least passes some sanity checks. So, and like I said, from now in future years, again, if people can get this ahead of time, I will kind of pull all these things that the foundational science areas are in need of. And I would ask that, you know, the foundational science areas can also fill that column in about what they might need from the other two areas. And we'll kind of have this as, you know, really focusing these monthly calls on the inner project coordination that needs to happen. So we're a little over an hour. Sorry for running a little long, but I'll open it up if there's any comments or questions before we sign off.
Jeff, did you want the foundational science area folks to stay on this time, or are we going to start doing that next time?
Any need, I'd ask just Arjun, MTS, Joe, you, or Dennis. Seems like we're pretty stable with what...
I think we had a chance to touch base, but if you have any questions, email, I guess, or call.
Thanks for the reminder, Shannon. We just, FYI, for people on the call, we block out a half hour in case there's something to follow up on after, and it doesn't sound like there's any urgent need, and Andy's not on the call, so appreciate that reminder, but I think we can just sign off.
Oh, I guess one other thing, just for the projects, and just remind myself too, with the ESA coming up, a number of us will be there in Andy's symposium. I need to get my talk together. But it'd be useful this kind of, you know, as we move toward August or late July, maybe just send presentations out just to, we don't have to show it or anything, but just share it with everyone to show what we're kind of talking about as we move forward to ESA.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine anybody going to ESA, it would be, you know, kind of for the monthly check-in, either July or August, mention that you're going to it, and maybe any title of any talk at ESA, and we'll have that information here. Because I would like to kind of even go with a flyer, like everybody, do a blast to as many people as we can, like this is the North Central Climate Issues and Regional Climate Science Centers are presenting this stuff at ESA. It would be a great thing to do, and this spreadsheet should, you know, allow you just to type it in one place, and we'll take care of tracking it in the next 2 months, or probably by the July one, what your title would be. And, okay. Great. Well, appreciate everybody taking the time to join. And if you have any comments you want to just sort of send to me offline on the format we're moving towards, please do. Between me and the help from Leanne Wilson, we're here to assist with this spreadsheet as needed. But hopefully, Google Drive is people are getting familiar with that mechanism, and this is a relatively painless way to give an update. So again, hopefully people can do it. And if you have any questions, let us know.
You get your extensions in now.
Yeah. Okay, we're signing off. I appreciate the time again. Thanks, folks.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.